The woman was stripped naked and hung up. A pair of iron ointments were placed on her feet. The female prisoner then activated the mechanism. The woman's legs were slowly spread apart. A basin of flame came into view. The warden had a provocative look on her face. She intended to burn down the garden of this female prisoner. The basin of fire is approaching. The screams of pain from the female prisoner instantly filled the women's prison. Even her companions outside were on their feet in fear. The woman's name was Nana. The reason she was being punished like this, it was only because she had a verbal altercation with her cellmate. By now, Nana was dying of torture, but she cannot rest. Instead, she had to keep working. Due to the physical pain, Nana soon collapsed on the floor. When her cellmates saw this, they tried to help her, but the warden scolded her. Nana was left in the sun all morning. It took until lunchtime to get help. Mary, who had just been sent to prison, was not happy with this behavior. She wanted to break out of prison, but her cellmates tell her that an escape is impossible, because this prison has teamed up with the surrounding hunters. Even if you escaped, you'd be caught again. Back in her cell, Mary sat on her bed and thought. A few days ago, she was watching a cockfight in the ring, and now she's being used by a bad man. To this hellhole, not only was there poison in her meals, even sleeping is attacked by poisonous snakes. If you are slow in your work during the day, and the guards will beat them to death. But the most disgusting of all is the service provided to the perverted warden. This day, the warden has found another female prisoner. Her name is Kim. Unlike the other female inmates, Kim was a very strong woman. Not only did she slap the warden, but she refused to give up, so she was taken to purgatory and tortured. It was a good thing that someone escaped from the prison. The warden had to go and check on him. She was able to save her life. Back in her cell, Kim is now covered in bruises. Mary's bedmate is worried, and this fuels Mary's desire to escape. Before she could make her move, they were called out of the room. They stood in two neat rows. They were being inspected by their superiors, perhaps because Mary was so tall and conspicuous. The officers stopped by her side, asking her about her life in prison. Mary told him the truth, but before she could finish, the officers stopped her, because they didn't want to hear the truth. And the simple Mary was dragged away by the female guards into a horrible place. Except for a small concrete plateau at your feet, there is sewage all around. The women were stung by leeches in the water whenever they went into the water. The woman was locked up in the stinkiest place in the prison. She had no choice but to cower in a small corner. She thought she had it bad enough, but she didn't expect someone had poured acid on the place. Luckily, the woman was lucky. The woman's name was Mary. The woman's name is Mary. She'd been framed by a bad man and sent to prison. And then she was locked up here for not knowing the rules. After a few hours in prison, Mary was let out, but the warden didn't let him go. Instead, they came to take her through a new torture. They stripped Mary of her clothes. Mary was tied to a rack with wire. Activating the button, Mary was subjected to electric shocks all over her body. When she returned, her body was charred. By the next day, all the women prisoners were called together again. This time they weren't here to greet anyone, but to be taught a lesson, because the other day, two female prisoners who had escaped from prison were caught by hunters hired by the prison. The two women were thrown to the ground with no clothes on, with blood on their legs, and the hunters were like hungry wolves, looking at the women prisoners, guessing who would be the next prey. Mary, who remained in prison, had a chill down her back when she saw it. The women were then put back in their cells. Her cellmates urged Mary to give up on the escape, but Mary was still determined to escape. She told them her escape route. It turned out that Mary had been locked in the sewers. She accidentally found a pipe. It leads to the outside of the prison. It was the best way to escape, so now they had to find a way out of the dormitory. And so Mary has an idea. There's a female prison guard here who is religious, so while the guard was checking the cells, they called the guardess over to them, on the pretext that they were going to pray in front of Celeste. They hoped that the wardress would let them to go out and pray for a few minutes. The warden agreed. The four men came out and pretended to do it with candles. Seeing the wardress kneeling in worship, one of them, Nui, took the candle holder, sneaked up behind the guardess, knocked her unconscious. The four of them work in pairs. Mary and Nana go to the sewers to set up the scene. Kim and Nui take care of the aftermath. Unfortunately, the warden walks up to them. Kim and Nui rush to hide with their guns, but the warden didn't move forward. From a distance, she saw something strange. The warden, who had been working here for many years, she immediately realized what was going on. She came straight to the sewers with a gun to catch them. 5 women in super short skirts, crawling through the sewers in sequence. 4 of them are female inmates of the prison. The remaining one is the female warden of the prison. Just now, they cut off the warden. The escape from the sewers was uneventful. They kept moving quickly. As they passed a river they wanted to take a break, but then the prison sirens sounded. It startled everyone. They can't afford to drop anything. They had to keep going. The warden tried to take advantage of the opportunity to escape. Kim found out out and shot him, and tried to end the warden's life. The other three saw this and rushed to stop Jean, because they needed a hostage to escape. They continued to walk with the warden, but it was getting dark. They couldn't find their way. They had to rest again for the night. But Kim had a drug addiction. He hadn't slept a wink. Watching the sky grow brighter, Jean suddenly remembered his mission, and that was to kill Mary. It turned out that Jean had been bribed. He had been bribed while in prison. If he killed Mary, he would be able to get the drugs he wanted. When he escaped from prison, he would be rescued by a bailiff, and the man who bought her was the man who put Mary in prison. But Kim didn't get her way, because the warden, who was afraid of death, was already awake. He thought that Kim was going to kill him and shouted. The rest of the men were awakened by the warden's voice. He had to stop. He started to change the subject. He talked to the others about where to go next. After the discussion, they decided to leave the warden here. They tied her to a tree. The hunters who had been tracking the warden came after them. They saw the clothes in the river. They were able to pinpoint the direction in which the women were fleeing. The women continued their escape, but halfway down the river, Nui came back. She came up to the warden with a tree branch. She hit the warden's body hard, but she stopped in the middle of it, because they had been in love before. Nui wanted to let the warden escape, but before she could untie all the ropes, the hunters were already after her. The hunters came after her. The hunters were like prey. They chased after them. The warden took advantage of the opportunity to escape, and she was chased by the hunters. They gnawed her to pieces. When the hunters were done having fun, they find the wardens who want to leave, and of course, they don't let go. The group started again in an obscene manner, and the three who had been running ahead, by now they had arrived at the beach. With the help of their informants, the boat to rescue Kim soon arrived. One by one, Kim and Mary were whisked aboard. Just as Nana was about to be taken away too, the informant suddenly made a deal with the man who was driving the boat. But before he can do so, he is killed by the man who runs the boat. Nana saw that the boat driver was no good. She ran away to the beach as quickly as possible. Luckily, the police arrived just in time. Nana was rescued, but the bad guys who were driving the boat got away. Mary and Kim escaped from prison, but they're in the wolves' den again. They have to take on clients to survive. Luckily, the police sneak into the area. They found Mary and found out what happened. And not only did they finally kill the leader of the bad guys, they were able to rescue Mary. But Kim, who was the one who knew what was going on, is left here forever. By the end of the film we learn about the darkness of society, but we also see in the women prisoners the spirit of resilience to fate.